Hi, my name is Omair and this is my personal project. My personal project was to create 3D computer generated images with a computer software which should look realistic enough that people will believe that they were taken with a real camera. Part of my intent was to also get more people interested in this kind of art because we already have a lot of great artists who draw on paper or 2D, but not many who know how to create 3D art or even know how it's done. I decided on this project because I genuinely wanted to improve my skills in using 3D software because I was pretty passionate about it and I was already using 3D software creating small projects for the past year, but now I wanted to take it more serious and get my skills up to a level where I could create realistic art. I chose my global context to be scientific and technical innovation, which I chose because I wanted to show how it's possible to create 3D realistic images with only using nothing but a computer. About 2 years ago, back in my other school, we had a subject where we had to design basic 3D geometric shapes with a computer software, whose name I can't remember, but I really liked that software. So I wanted to download that software on my personal device at home. I tried to look for it online but couldn't find it, so I looked for an alternative 3D software, and that's when I found about Blender, and so I downloaded it and started experimenting with it. I started creating small projects, watching a tutorial or two, but did not work on it too much because it was confusing and difficult. Blender is a powerful software for modeling, rigging, animation, simulation, rendering, and compositing, but it can also do motion tracking, video editing, and even game creation. So now grade 10 starts, and so does the personal project. I realized most of my basic research was done, like what program I should use. Obviously Blender, because I already know the basics. I could have gone for Cinema 4D, and maybe I would have gotten better results, because it has a better render engine. But that's like starting from the beginning, and my research showed that 6 months is not enough time to learn Cinema 4D from scratch. According to Michael Balchaitis, an expert in Cinema 4D, it takes 1 to 2 years just to learn the basics of Cinema 4D. Another reason why I chose Blender is that it's free comparing to Cinema 4D, which is about $3,000. Afterwards, I thought about what the best way to do my specialized research will be, and the first thing I looked into was online books about Blender. Honestly, they weren't very helpful because first of all, there weren't many of them, and second, they were outdated, so some of them were for older versions of Blender, and it's hard to find what you need. Sometimes you need to learn a specific thing, but it's quite hard to find that specific thing, and sometimes it's not even mentioned in the book. Blogs and online frequently asked questions were also somewhat the same as books in how useful they were, because sometimes you would have a different question than what would be asked on the blog. I found out that the most useful resource was YouTube, because first of all, there were many tutorials about Blender, because the Blender community is really big, and second, the presenters explain things very clearly and demonstrate what they're talking about, and it's much easier to understand because it's visual. And one more thing which is good about video tutorials is that you can easily follow along with it, especially for people who have 2 monitors, which was fortunately the case with me, because you can put the video tutorial on your second screen and follow along with your main screen. The most helpful tutorial that I watched was a 6-hour long tutorial, which taught me everything about making cars. The most important point was to have clean topology. This is really important in any kind of object, but most important in objects that will need to look shiny. Using Blender is really challenging. Most people who start to use Blender usually give up because it's too complicated. The UI of Blender is really confusing. There are buttons everywhere that do certain things. Some buttons have names and some have drawings on them, but both are equally hard to understand what they will do. Blender also uses a lot of keyboard shortcuts, not like the usual copy, paste, and undo shortcuts. In Blender, there are more than 150 keyboard shortcuts, but not all of them need to be memorized. However, to become fast at what I was doing, I needed to learn about 15 to 30 shortcuts. Blender has a really complicated shader editor, where you have to use nodes to create certain materials. The shader editor in Blender is a place where you make all the materials for your objects. You can change some of the basic functions of your material on the main menu, but the shader editor gives you more options and more flexibility in visualization. For people who are used to it, it makes sense to them, but for complete beginners, it will be very confusing. One of the other frustrating things about Blender is navigating in 3D space. For someone who is new to Blender, they wouldn't even be able to look around without looking online how to do it, because in Blender, to look around, you have to click on the scroll wheel, and some people don't even know that the scroll wheel clicks when you push it down. And modeling is the hardest out of all of them, because first, there are a few types of modeling techniques. For example, hard surface modeling, sculpting, image-based modeling, subdivisions, and more. I mostly used all the types of modeling mentioned, but the easiest out of all of them is hard surface modeling, because you don't necessarily need to care about having clean topology and triangles, because you just need to make it look like how you want it. But while trying to model something with subdivisions, you need to consider clean topology, and try not to use any triangles or faces with more than 4 vertices. And sculpting is fun, but at the same time it could be quite hard to get what you want, because you can't make big changes easily to your model. Your model will take shape slowly, and you need to be somewhat good at drawing too. Before the personal project, I already used to use Blender. Just getting used to it and experimenting with different projects. I was trying to find something that I will like and that I will work more on, because there are a ton of things you could do with Blender, and not even the most professional Blender users know everything about Blender. What I'm saying is that there is a lot that can be done with Blender, so I was choosing projects at random, such as cars, characters, interiors, etc. But I still haven't found one thing that I will like more than the others. For now I'm focusing more on creating cars and infrastructure. In grade 9 I had a class of digital design, and there we had a project to create a party box, so I wanted to use Blender as much as I could in that class to improve and get more experience. But it turned out that I only used Blender to visualize my final product. But that was still good for me because I got more experience in making complex models with unusual shapes. But the thing it most helped me with is UV unwrapping, UV editing, and texturing. The tutorials I watched were mainly long tutorials, so 3 hours or longer. Other than that, I don't even watch any tutorials for a project. I had all the skills to do whatever I wanted to do. All I needed was some experience and practice to get better at it. For example, one thing I definitely improved in just with practice is cars. From the beginning, I had never watched a tutorial on how to make a car. I just went for it. All I knew is that I had to use some kind of blueprint to create the car from. But for my last car, I did watch a tutorial on how to make a car, and it was very helpful for sure. At some point in time, I would get stuck somewhere and wouldn't know how to use a tool or needed a tool to achieve a certain effect, so I would go online and search for it. But the thing with Blender is that whenever you look up something online, it always comes up with video tutorials. They're good, but sometimes you just need to do something very simple, and the videos usually overcomplicate and they're way too long. So I would just go and ask a professional that I have contacts with, and they would explain it to me very simply. How I got in contact with a professional is that 1 year ago I was looking for a WhatsApp group related to Blender, and I came across one with about 260 people, and so I joined in, and since then I'm in there. I got to know the people in the group and got to see their artworks. These are my design specifications. The most important ones are my goal, which is to convince people that CGI made with Blender looks realistic, my global context, which is scientific and technological innovation, the aspect of my global context, which is technological innovation / impact of scientific and technological advances on communities. I wanted to make a timetable for myself to keep myself organized, but then I realized that I didn't really need a timetable because there weren't really any steps to my project. All I needed was practice, and I could get that by creating different projects once in a while. I tried to keep it at least one project per week, varying the types of projects I would work on, so that by the end I would reach my goal. Every time I worked on a project, I recorded my process and any other important events that happened during the process of me working on the project, and I wrote them all in a Google Slides presentation and added some screenshots and visuals. I would sometimes even make a video recording and make a time-lapse out of it. You can find my full process journal after the credits and works cited of this video. My final product will be a digital portfolio of the projects that I have created with Blender. I chose my global context to be scientific and technological innovation. Why I chose it is because I wanted my project to have an impact on people, that they will be more interested in CGI, and that matched with the definition of scientific and technological innovation, which is impact of scientific and technological advances on communities and environments. My aim is to attract more attention to this not well-known side of technology. I'm not usually organized, but it was easy to stay motivated as this was interesting. I would usually work on my projects during the weekend, because in the normal school days I wouldn't have enough time to do anything, because I needed to do my homework. And the projects would usually take more than 4 hours each, and once you leave a project midway, it's hard to start with it again the next day, so it was better to just do it in the weekend all in one go. I went mostly accordingly to my design specifications, but only in some places it didn't really work out. For example, my goal was to convince people that my art looked as realistic as if it were to be taken with a real camera. In my opinion, I didn't reach my goal, but according to the 48 people that took my survey at the exhibition, I have reached my goal. In that sense, I guess I did reach my goal, but it doesn't seem to me like that. But maybe it's just because I made the artworks myself, and therefore I know all the flaws and imperfections. Also, I have a lot of experience seeing other people's 3D artworks during the course of this project, so I can easily tell the difference between real pictures and CG ones. In my design specifications, I wrote that I should not make projects that my computer wouldn't be able to handle them, but that didn't seem to be the case. Almost all my projects were a struggle for my computer, and 4 of them made Blender completely crash, resulting in loss of progress. And one project made my whole laptop crash, which did kind of make me worried, and I did lose a 3-hour-long time-lapse video and a lot of progress in the project. The only way to prevent crashes is to first have a powerful computer, and second is to not push your computer to its limit. I mean, my computer is overkill for normal use, but for Blender it's not even a decent computer. Usually when I was working on a big project, my computer would start to slow down, which is not not good. One thing which slowed down my computer the most is applying a subsurf modifier on some objects, because it makes the objects more smoother by creating extra vertices in between the already existing vertices, causing extra stress for my computer. After some experimenting, I found out that when you put the viewport subdivisions at 0, it helps with the problem a lot, and that allows me to work on the project without any interruptions. However, in some scenes, even with all the objects set to 0 subdivisions in the viewport, my computer still struggled because there were too many objects and the scene was too complex. For example, there was a delay when switching between objects. The delay was about 5 to 8 seconds, but normally there should be no delay. I found a way around this problem too. Blender has a few types of viewport shadings. For example, solid, the default, rendered view, and a few more. But there is one which is called boundary box. This option does what it says. It draws a box around the boundaries of an object, and that needs much less processing power. So whenever I was working on a big project, if I wanted to select a different object, I would first go on boundary box view, and then I would select the object, then back to solid view, eliminating any delay. One time before I was about to start working on a project, I wanted to record a time-lapse of my work, but I didn't want to do it in the traditional way, which is recording your video in 30 or 60 frames per second, and then speeding it up in a video editing software. There is a problem with that technique. If you want to make a 4-hour long video into a 10-minute time-lapse, most of your 4-hour long video will be a waste. That's if you record in 60 frames per second. But I thought of that, and I wanted to find the optimal frames per second for no waste of data. So I calculated. So if you play back this 4-hour long video, which is recorded in 2.5 frames per second and 60 frames per second, it will make a 10-minute time-lapse. But it's not possible to record in 2.5 FPS, so I went with 3 FPS, which made a time-lapse of around 13 minutes. If you're using any 3D software, the first most important thing is that you need to be able to navigate and look at things from different angles. The second most important thing is being able to model something, being able to transform what you imagine in your head into a digital 3D object. And that's another skill that I have acquired. When making animations, you need to be able to predict the time that it's going to take you to render the animation. This is helpful because sometimes it could take minutes, hours, or even days. So you need to be prepared for the amount of time it's going to take before starting the process. For this reason, it's helpful to be able to calculate the approximate render time of your whole animation. It's nothing special, it's just simple math. First, you render 4 frames evenly spread out to your timeline. Then you record the time they took to render, and then you calculate the average of them, and then multiply that number by the number of frames you have. And based on this, I would decide how I was going to render the animation. For me, if it was less than 2 hours, I would just render it on the spot. If it was more than 2 hours, I would render it overnight. And if it was in days, then I would let the render farm render it for me. A render farm is a place where a lot of computers work together to render something as fast as possible. After I created one of my last scars, which took me over 7 hours of work time, I lost motivation for a while, but then I decided to participate in a challenge where everyone had to make a scene which is related to a theme, and then a winner is chosen. This kept me motivated because my work was featured on their YouTube channel, and I was hopeful to win one day. But one day, as they were showcasing the different artworks, I saw one which had a really realistic mist effect, which I really liked, and I wanted to learn how to create it myself. Apparently, the person who created that artwork was in the same WhatsApp group as me, but about 260 other Blender users. So I decided to contact him and ask him how he did it, and if he would show me how to do it. And so he was kindly willing to show me how to do it, and he was even kind enough to record a video tutorial for me to show how he had done it. One other time I made an animation and I wanted a professional's opinion about it, so I contacted one of the professionals from the WhatsApp group and showed them the video. At first they obviously said that it's perfect, but then later they gave me some honest advice. I used their advice and the final video was noticeably much better, and it taught me some things that I could use for my other projects. For example, one of the things that they said was to use the sapling add-on in Blender. It was a bit of a confusing tool, but it was a very helpful tool, and they recommended me a better shader for the snow. I have definitely improved my skills in using Blender in the time span of the personal project. I have learned a few things which are really important to creating convincing images. For example, trying to have clean topology. It's very important for objects that look smooth and not have weird shadings and shapes. It's most important when the objects are going to have a shiny material, because then it's most noticeable. Another thing I learned is proper lighting techniques. It's also very important because it can make the render look professional or not. A lighting technique that I learned is called the 3-point lighting. It has 3 lights. The first one is the main light. The second one is mirror to the main light, but smaller. And the third one is behind the object. This project definitely helped me with learning Blender. I learned a lot of new things that I never knew before, and I would never have thought that I would be able to achieve such results. As an IB learner, I think I've improved in some of the IB learner profiles. For example, I became more of a communicator by talking to experts and asking them for help. or some feedback. I became an inquirer by being curious about some things and wanted to be able to learn them. For example, where I saw someone else's work and I wanted to learn how to do the mist effect on it, so I contacted him and asked him about it. I became more of a risk taker by choosing to do my final report in form of a video, because I thought I would be able to explain myself much easier. But there were no example video reports at my school, so I just took the risk and went for it. Okay, so welcome to my appendix. Let's start with this. So this is my academic honesty form. Here is all the meetings that we had and signatures from me and the teacher, supervisor. And some more. And that's it. So a special thanks to Sahil Kunjir for being the cameraman and also participating in my report. Here you can see him. I also got approval from his father. Where is it? That he is allowed in the video. So, yep. And another special thanks to Claire Benedict for this shot, the drawing. Okay, my computer's left. Oh, there. Oh, stop. Okay. Okay, so the sources of my personal project will all be in the description of this video. There's going to be a section which says personal project sources, and there's going to be a long list of all the sources that I used in MLA format. So I don't need to mention them here in the video now. They will all be in the description of the video. But for my for the report, for the video report, I could mention some here. For example, the softwares that I used. First one was Blender, which I used to make this shot. This one. And I used Audacity, which I'm also using to record my audio, and OBS to record the screen. All the MLA format links will be in the description for these two. And I also used HitFilm Pro to edit the whole video, the report. So those were the softwares that I used, and also this model of the robot. This was not made by me. I downloaded off the website of TurboSquid by this guy Nicola. He made it this for free. It's open source for everyone. And also, here are my process journals that you saw in the video. There will be a link to these in the description too. And this is my the form survey that I did in the exhibition with all these responses. Yep, that's mostly it. And a few photos of, well, I already showed some photos, but here we go again, I guess. Here are some of the works that I made in the duration of the personal project. Oh, that didn't count. Yep. No, these not. No. Yeah. Nope. I mean, I did, but like, no. Yeah, this one too. Yeah, basically. And that's it for the appendix. By the way, the sources are all gonna be in the description of the video. You can scroll down and click on the show more description thingy, and they're all in there. Thanks for watching.